Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the album Armageddon by the band P.L.J. Band.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of odd to say it. They're a band called P.L.J. Band. Their name is Band in the name. It's really odd. As you can hear, my voice is getting so creaky because I'm sick. Everything is going against me, honestly, but I have to make this video, so we'll make do. Anyway, here's some of my favorite bits from this album. So in today's video, we'll be taking a look at an album that hails from no other than Greece. And this album talks about religion and sins and blasphemy, and it's so out there that the only record label that took it was actually just the Vertigo record label. Yes, this album even came out in the third year of its respective decade, and of course that album is no other than Armageddon by P.L.J. Band. Yes, as you might have told already, this album reeks quite similarly to yet another album coming from the land of mythologies, and that's of course 666 by Aphrodite's Child. And while there are definitely a lot of similarities between these two albums, the first major similarity of course is the fact that Aphrodite's Child 666 came out in 1972 and today's album came out just 10 years after in 82. But what might be the biggest difference of the two is actually their own subgenre in the world of progressive rock. While 666 was definitely in the realm of being somewhat symphonic prog and even eclectic prog if you look at it in that way, today's album is much more akin and is a prime example of your average psychedelics-less space rock. Now today's album has a pretty magnificent story behind it, though I really don't know a lot about it because we don't have a lot of information available about it. But what you might need to know is the fact that in 1980 a band called P.L.J. Band formed in Greece, and they started working for the upcoming 2 years on writing their own material and even playing some live shows. And in 1982 they came out releasing their debut album, which is the one we're reviewing today, called Armageddon. And this one might have had big success if it did not actually receive a lot of backlash upon release. Now the backlash itself actually did not come straight from the listeners wanting to get to listen to this album, but rather from the overall government that existed in Greece at the time. You see, the government basically did not want music like this to be out there. They considered this one to be quite blasphemous and getting all over against the holy morals of the Christianity religion, and well, they didn't want these things floating around, so they did as best as they could to destroy all of these albums, and this one particularly suffered. It didn't get a lot of initial releases, and from those a lot of the records were destroyed, leaving roughly around only 300 copies on vinyl existing today, which makes them some really highly sought after collectibles, reaching at some points prices up to $30,000 US. So if you have a vinyl copy of this album just lying around in your house and you did not know how much it's worth, well, you might want to recheck it because this one, well, it's kind of a big deal. Now, just to give you some context, after releasing this album in 1982, the band P.L.J. Band would actually go ahead and change their name to Termites and release an eponymous album in 1983, which is a highly obscure album, and I don't think that it has a lot to do with progressive rock as a whole, and afterwards they disbanded, not not leaving any trace behind. Now this album Armageddon is a very interesting and quite an obscure pick. Yes, this one is not well known by many people, especially not in the psychedelic space rock sphere. All of us know the basics such as Hawkwind, Pink Floyd and whatever, but not a lot of people know of these guys, but the few that do know them would consider this one probably as one of the greatest all-time entries into this particular subgenre. Now honestly, I totally get why after listening to this one, and I'm glad that there were several other peoples that didn't want the memory of this album to be erased completely from the world. So in the year of 1991 in Germany, someone decided to re-release this album on CD this time, but unfortunately, seeing as the original master tapes for this album were lost or maybe even destroyed as far as I'm concerned, they just had to literally copy over this album from vinyl and release it on CD without remixing or remastering it. Now, as I already noted in this video, I am pretty sick right now and I'm not feeling very good, and one of my symptoms is actually a loss of balance, which is really odd, but yeah, I just really can't hear a lot of things and my sense of balance is all over the place. So when it came to listening to this one, this was actually quite a refreshment because I really wanted to not think about what I'm feeling at the moment. So I went outside to the porch in the cool evening, I took out an incense stick, I put it on, I lit it on, there was an aroma in the air, I put my headphones on and I started playing this album, and oh boy, the experience I was getting out of it was just sublime. You see, as I said, Armageddon is considered to be one of the prime hidden gems of the psychedelic rock era, and well, this one, it's so freaking good. It immediately gets you into this dark and even somewhat ancient mood that this one revolves around, and as I said, it goes with the themes of religion, blasphemy and all things like that, and honestly, for 44 minutes you're just so embraced into this entire experience that it's, as I said, truly sublime. Now, while I did have much to write and criticize about this album, I also feel like a lot of the time was actually used by just leaning back, closing my eyes and enjoying this album for what it is, because honestly, this is one of those cases of being too overly critical about this album would lead you to not really enjoy the experience it's trying to evoke in you. And well, you can definitely see it right from the start of this album with a track called Intro. This one feels like somewhat of a development on the track Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun by Pink Floyd. It just goes in the same direction, though it deviates from it in the most wonderful way you can imagine, and it has this lovely drone sounds in the background and uses some very unique interplay of the guitars. Oh, and by the way, I think that this is the moment we have to stop and talk about the guitars in this album. You see, out of the pentet that are responsible for creating this album, 3 of them are actually guitarists, and more often than not you'd hear the 3 of them playing simultaneously. Now, the roles are split in a way that each one has its own specific purpose in the song, and honestly, I love it so much. So you have the one person playing the lead, whether it be acoustic or electric guitar, then you have the one playing the rhythm classic guitar or the rhythm electric guitar, and on top of it all, just bringing it all together, you have the 12-string guitar being played simultaneously, which creates this amazing effect. Now, the follow-up track is called I See People, and it does take a bit of a different direction, still remaining in the psychedelic rock era, but still in a way it is also quite different. This one does incorporate some ambience into the song, starting off with a preacher preaching in what I might assume to be a town square, just saying his own things in English, which was quite a surprise for me. But just to note out, this album does not only incorporate English, but in fact also incorporates Greece and even some Latin, especially in the track of Armageddon 1. Now, while this album is all throughout a pretty great album, there's nothing better on it than the 2 parts of the title track. As I said, there's Armageddon 1, and of course there's the opus and my personal favorite from the album called Armageddon 2. Now, this second part I really cannot wholly describe in words, so you're gonna have to listen to this one and experience it for yourselves. But just for context, the part 1 of the Armageddon piece basically builds up and gets you really in the mood for what's about to come, and then we suddenly arrive at Armageddon 2, which hits hard. It also has its own build up but in a different sense, and at the 4 minutes mark it just turns so amazing. I can't even describe it. It's such a great song. It seemingly has a simple structure of repetition, but you honestly don't feel it. But when it does come into play, you're actually happy for it because, as I personally perceived it, it's very well structured. Now, after Armageddon 2, we actually get 3 more tracks, and these 3, while not being as great as Armageddon 2, they're still pretty good. And out of the 3, I think I'd have to choose The Void as my personal favorite. This track is a definite game changer from everything that came before it. It uses only synths layered on top of one another, and they create this sense of just falling in this endless void. And honestly, I don't know how they managed to do so, but they've done so well, and I come back to this one definitely more often than not. So yeah, all in all, this album was one heck of a trip. And yes, I cannot imagine what this would be like with an inebriated mind, but even if you're entirely sober, it makes for one heck of a psychedelic journey, and honestly, I enjoyed it very much so. And while it might be quite different from 666 by Aphrodite's Child, where it doesn't really take the same plastic and demonic vibes to it, I still do think that this album is a masterpiece of its own kind. And personally, while I'm not the biggest fan of psychedelic rock, this one really lingered with me, and honestly, I loved it so much for it. So this album cover, which to me looks like something taken right off of one of Salvador Dali's works, was created by a man that has a name which sounds like a spell from Harry Potter called Aristomenes Tsolakis. Now unfortunately, while he did create this amazing painting, I couldn't find any information about him online, so I guess that's only what we have. Now the first time I saw this cover when I was preparing to listen to this album, I had the assumption that this was going to be an extreme metal album. Just something about this cover seemed quite white for it, but now that I have listened to this album, I can definitely say that while it's not an extreme metal album, the cover still fits perfectly. Now as for what this painting actually means, I can say that I definitely don't really know, but if I'd had to interpret it myself, I'd say that this figure seems to me like some sort of a fallen angel holding the world in their hands and lingering upon it, maybe even about to destroy it. I don't know what that means, but it's definitely an intense picture. So all in all, the album Armageddon by P.L.J. Band was quite the big surprise. As I said, I'm not so big into the psychedelic rock scene, but this one just blew my socks away. I wasn't expecting this one, and it's definitely a step up from a lot of the other things that I know from this subgenre, but again, it's also not really that perfect, so I think that a good rating for it for now would be somewhere around an 8 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Cocoon by Tiger Moth Tales. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wan, Arista Kings, and Lindsay Haycox. You guys are just the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.